Hello, welcome to Artistic Adventures. I'm Holly from BB Library, and our artist today is Romare Bearden. And he's somebody who I really love. His works are very colorful, they're engaging, it's like snapshots into everyday people's lives in the areas that he lived, which was basically the South. He was born in North Carolina, and his family moved him north during what's called the Great Migration. It was a time in like the 1920s or so that, well, even a little before that, that a lot of African Americans moved from the South up into the big cities in the North. And his family lived both in Philadelphia as well as in New York City, which is where he's associated with. He works in what's called a collage. And a collage is nothing but just rather than painting something or drawing it, it's like using pieces of things, like pieces of fabric or pictures or pieces of paper and gluing them together. And that is what we're going to be doing today. But he's known for his collages. Although he experimented with a lot of other things. He did watercolors and oils, and he drew cartoons and all kinds of stuff. But he's known as a collage. And you're using paper, newspaper, books from pictures from books and pictures from magazines and papers and even some paint. He layered things over and over to make these things. I can't wait for you to see them. But he was not just an artist. He was a teacher, a college professor, a writer, a musician. He designed costumes and sets for theaters. Oh my gosh, head of all sorts of cultural organizations as well as civil rights organizations. And all through most of his career, he worked as a social worker in New York City. And because his mom was very active in the civil rights movement, his home from the time he was a toddler and up was filled with some of the biggest names and the greatest thinkers in the African American community. So he had a very interesting life. So book today is different than some of the others because it's entirely illustrated with his works, and it's called Romare Bearden Collage of Memories. So that's where the collage part comes in. So as we go through this, you'll get to see a lot of his works. And this follows kind of like a collage. It isn't a story that kind of takes all the way through step by step his life. It's like little pieces of things that are put together to make the collage of his life. So let's read our book. Okay, here we go. Romare Bearden, Collage of Memories. It's written by Jan Greenberg, illustrated by Mr. Bearden himself. And it's published by, which was kind of a surprise to me, it's a publisher I've not seen do a lot of children's books. It's published by Henry Abrams publishers, and they are known for their art books. So that makes a lot of sense with this. But it's not what I'm used to seeing with picture books. Okay, painted paper scissored into shapes, scraps of fabric, hands cut from photograph, bits and pieces pasted on board. This collage, Early Carolina Morning, recalls a scene in the South almost 100 years ago. It was composed from memory by the artist Romare Bearden. His pictures are filled with images of everyday life as he lived it. Roosters, cats, guitars, trains, snakes, sunsets, and people were some of his favorite subjects. When we look at his paintings, we feel we could be right there with him, running through a cotton field in North Carolina, or sitting on the front stoop of a tenement in Harlem. His art celebrates the struggles and triumphs of African American life in the 20th century. Step inside Bearden's world where jazz, rhythm, and blues meet a kaleidoscope of shimmying colors. Great-grandfather Kennedy hoisted 3-year-old Rami, as everyone called him, high on his shoulders. Off they went to the station to watch the trains whizzing by. A crowd had gathered there, the funeral train for Mrs. Stonewall Jackson, the wife of the Confederate general, slowly passed by. Great-grandfather held Rami up to see the railroad car carrying the coffin strewn with flowers and surrounded by soldiers. Watching the train steam in and out of town was one of Rami's favorite pastimes. All aboard for the New York and Atlanta Express. He loved to hear the conductor shouting out the names of the cities. Rami and his great-grandfather would make up stories about who might be traveling on the train,
where they might be heading. Lining the tracks were cotton mills that filled the air with a constant rumble of machinery processing cotton. Rami never forgot the sounds of his childhood. The roar of the engine pulling into town, the train whistles, a rooster crowing, gospel singers, or guitars. But it was the visual images that remained most vivid in his mind. Rami was born in the white wood frame big house of his father's grandparents. The Kennedys lived in the bustling town of Charlotte, North Carolina, the seat of Mecklenburg County. Framed by a wraparound porch and wide veranda, the big house stood on a corner across the yard from their grocery store. Rami and his parents, Bessie and Howard, lived down the street. From their window, they could see the trestle leading to the main train station. It was 1911, the beginning of the great migration of African Americans leaving the South, riding the trains up north to find work. With blonde, curly hair and blue eyes, Rami grew to be the fair-haired boy of the family. Doted on, but not spoiled. Usually the term fair-haired boy kind of means the favorite. Outgoing and curious, like his mother, Bessie, Rami could charm apples off the tree. As a child, Rami spent his days roaming the neighborhood and exploring the countryside. He played ball with his cousin Spinky on the steps of the Old Mint, where they used to make gold coins. He went to band concerts on Saturday and church on Sundays, where his father played the organ. Quilting bees, cotton picking, revival meetings, and picnics all formed the memories that he later would turn into art. The people Rami knew in Charlotte later became the subjects for hundreds of collages, including these two portraits of a woman named Maudel Sleet working in her garden. He said, "Didn't look anything like her. I tried to give it my feeling instead of making it the exact likeness." Born into slavery, Rami's great-grandparents, Rosa and Henry Kennedy, gained their freedom after the Civil War. They first worked as servants for the family of a man who was to become President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson. By 1914, the Kennedys had become successful, well-respected citizens of Charlotte, owning several houses and a grocery store. But times were changing in the South due to the new laws that further separated whites and black Americans, different schools, divided sections on buses, and other unfair and unequal rules of segregation. One day, Howard and Bessie took 3-year-old Rami for a drive to go shopping in the white section of town. While his father stayed with him in their horse-drawn carriage, Bessie went into a store. Howard left Rami for a moment to look in a shop window. As he stepped back to the carriage, people on the street began pointing. The dark-skinned man approached the blonde child. "Must be a kidnapper," they said. Bessie ran out of the store just in time to straighten things out. This upsetting incident made a strong impression on Rami's parents. They wanted their son to be raised in a place where differences between people were respected rather than feared. They would find such a place in America. Before long, Rami and his parents packed up and left the South for good, eventually settling in New York City. There, on the streets of Harlem and at school, Rami met people from many other ethnic groups, including Irish, Italian, and Jewish immigrants from Europe. It seemed as if everyone was from somewhere else looking for a better life. Later, Rami would express this yearning to belong in America through his collages of Harlem. As he grew up, Rami often went back and forth between New York, Charlotte, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore to visit his grandparents. One summer when he was about 10, he stayed with his father's mother, Caddy, in Lutherville, a town near Baltimore, Maryland. Her neighbors, Mrs. Johnson, who still baked with the tin pans her grandmother used as a slave in the South, made a special cake that looked just like a watermelon. swirls of red batter, seeds made out of hand-cut chocolate chips, green striped icing topped off with a sugary glaze. Mrs. Johnson's watermelon cake was in great demand. Every Saturday, Rami filled his wagon with freshly baked cakes to deliver house to house to wealthy folks in town. Mrs. Johnson's husband, a blind folk singer, would go along strumming the guitar with one hand, holding on to Rami with the other. One afternoon, they stopped by the side of the road so Rami could fill a pail with blackberries to bring back to Mrs. Johnson. Mr. Johnson sat on a tree stump and plucked the guitar. The tunes he played were like nothing Rami had ever heard before. Mr. Johnson made up his own music, saying his sounds came from the wind moving through his fingers on the string. In Mr. Jeremiah's Sunset Guitar and three folk musicians, guitar players strummed their folksy blues, recreating the day a young boy wandered through the country fields listening to Mr. Johnson's music and picking ripe berries. Billows of gray smoke, thundering furnaces, shrill factory whistles. This was Pittsburgh in the 1920s, center of the steel industry. Rami's grandmother, Carrie Banks, Bessie's mom, ran a boarding house for steel mill workers, many of whom had migrated here from the South to find better paying jobs. As a teenager staying with his grandmother, Rami often saw the men return home, their skins scorched from the fiery blasts. One summer day in Pittsburgh, Rami was shooting marbles in the backyard with his friend Dennis, cousin Spinky from Charlotte. Out of nowhere, a boy with braces on his legs hobbled over to the edge of the yard. He didn't say a word, just stood there, watching them. Dennis started teasing him, and soon the boys were beating up on him. Miss Carey, who spotted the scuffle from her kitchen window, ran out, shaking her broom to rescue the new boy. His name was Eugene, and soon, as Rami said, he got to be our friend. It turned out Eugene knew how to draw. Miss Carey set up a table so he could give Rami lessons. On sheets of brown paper, Eugene would sketch the boarding house where he lived with his mother a few blocks away. By leaving out the front of the house, he exposed the goings-on inside, half-dressed women dancing and drinking. He even drew a shooting. When Miss Carey saw the buildings, she was so shocked that she threw them in the furnace and marched straight over to Eugene's house to pack up his clothes. For a while, Eugene moved into Miss Carey's along with his pet doves and pigeon. A year later, the frail boy died. Rami never forgot Eugene, and his homage, painting Farewell Eugene, he recalled his funeral. And that's what this picture is right there. In later collages, picturing the conflict and strife of African Americans living in Harlem, a dense city neighborhood of New York, he too stripped down the facades of buildings to reveal what was happening inside. By the 1930s, Rami's energetic and capable mother, Bessie, had become well known in Harlem for her work as a newspaper editor and as a political activist for African Americans, especially women. Rami's father, Howard, worked as a sanitation inspector for the New York Health Department. From actors to writers to politicians and musicians, everybody who was anybody in Harlem stopped by the Bearden apartment. Rami would come home from school to find the poet Langston Hughes or bandleader Duke Ellington sitting in the living room, surrounded by Bessie's 10 or more Siamese cats. It was the heyday of jazz, and Rami haunted nearly every honky-tonk and dance hall. You had to get with the music, he said. The clothes you wore, the way you talked, everything you did, you might say, geared to groove. Jazz inspired him to make some of his most colorful paintings. Rami was good at anything he tried to do. A star pitcher on an all-black baseball team in college, he was encouraged to try out for the major leagues. But there were no African-American players in the big league baseball in those days. A coach told him he could pass for white, but Rami, who'd been taught to fight against prejudice, refused. Besides, he was more interested in drawing. His witty cartoons had appeared regularly in his college humor magazine. There was one problem. Bessie and Howard expected Rami to become a doctor, not an artist. But Rami had been taught to be true to himself. After college, he enrolled in art classes at night. To support himself, he took a day job as a caseworker for the welfare department, helping poor gypsy families who had migrated to New York from Eastern Europe. Sympathy for his clients and the hard lives they endured would be expressed in his later artwork. Sad faces with puzzled looks, the accusing eyes confront the viewer in this collage called 110th Street. The photographs are of real people cut out of magazines. Putting the photograph in a different space than you saw it in the magazine, Robbie says, can have an entirely different meaning. In 1940, Rami finally rented his first art studio in Harlem, setting up an easel with paintbrushes and oils. He tacked brown paper on the easel, and there it sat blank week after week. Rami had a case of artist block, which meant he was stuck. A woman named Ida came to clean the studio every Saturday. One of Rami's friends said she was so ugly that she looked like a locomotive coming around the corner. One day, Ida asked him if the empty sheet of brown paper was the same one she'd seen on the wooden stand a week before. "I don't know what to paint," Rami admitted. "Why don't you paint me?" she asked. He stared at her with surprise. "I know what I look like, but when you look and find out what's beautiful in me, then you're going to be able to do something on that paper of yours," Rami said. It got me thinking about people I knew and remembered down south. He began painting scenes recalling Charlotte of his memory, experimenting with an opaque watercolor medium called gouache. Opaque means that it's not like if you're working with watercolor that you can see through it and you can put other colors over it. Gouache is something that you can't really see through very well. Ida inspired him to work with live models, and his interest in painting the African-American female figure continued throughout his career. In the 1950s, the fashion in New York art world was a style of painting with dashing lines, thick paint, and no recognizable subject matter called abstract expressionist. And that's like our Jackson Pollock we looked at. These big brash works were causing a stir all over the United States and Europe. Rami never followed the latest trend. He had his own ideas. The abstract paintings he made were soft and quiet, with thin, washed-out colors of color. The texture of the sky. But eventually Rami realized he could not say what he wanted to say. To paint the life of my people as I know it, without a realistic subject. Unable to support himself with his art, Rami started writing songs. One of his compositions, Sea Breeze, rose to the top of the record charts. "How can you waste your life," a friend asked him, "when you don't believe in what you're doing?" Rami knew he was right. Somehow he'd lost his way. One night at a party, he met a talented young dancer named Nanette Rohan. They fell in love and got married. She convinced him to get back to painting again. The summer of 1963, 200,000 people marched on Washington, D.C. to demand equal rights for African Americans. Television and newspapers flashed pictures of the march across the country. In New York, African American artists joined together to help the cause. The group named themselves Spiral to indicate the starting point that would move in all directions, especially upward. The Spiral group wanted to be accepted as artists in their own right, without reference to their color, but they also wanted to respect their heritage, to make a difference. At one of their meetings, Rami brought in a large sack filled with hundreds of photographs he'd collected and cut in various shapes. Spreading them out on the floor, he suggested the group make a large mural together. The other artists lost interest in the project, but it gave Rami a great idea. Back at his studio, he carefully pasted down photos clipped from magazines onto small boards. Then he photographically enlarged the collages, mounting them on masonite boards. Called photo montages, these large black and white pictures were based on his childhood memories of Mecklenburg County, Pennsylvania, and Harlem. Photos of oversized heads, as seen in Cotton and Mysteries, which there's Cotton, and that one's Mysteries, seemed to project themselves right out at the viewer. He named this powerful new series Projections. When the photo montages were exhibited, the series was hailed as a great success. After years of experimenting, Rami finally made a breakthrough, finding a style that felt right and expressed what he needed to say. Through his collages, he would document the history and culture of people he felt had long been ignored. Some found his street scenes raw and fearful, but no other American artist had given such a powerful voice to those who had not been heard. He said, "Art celebrates a victory. It involves conquering and redeeming both the beauty and sullenness of the past. It proclaims that black people have survived in spite of everything." In his studio, Rami played jazz recordings. Jazz provided him with continuous finger-snapping, head-shaking enjoyment, but it also filled him with new ideas. He listened to the songs of female ballad singers who sang of lost love and heartbreak. "Even though you go through these terrible experiences, you come out feeling good. Life will prevail," Rami said. He paid attention to the silences or pauses between the notes in jazz, especially on the piano. "I listened and listened until I couldn't hear the music, only the silences." The contrast of hot and cold colors seen in his collages is similar to the pauses heard in jazz. The artist learned to improvise like the musicians, finding a structure for his pictures and letting himself go from there. We heard that word improvise when we looked at Kandinsky. It just means, in music, it means just sitting down and playing whatever you feel with no music and nothing planned out. And a lot of times he felt that his work also, like Kandinsky's was, it was an improvisation, just letting himself go, just paint. Colors and shapes pop and pulsate in a staccato rhythm in this collage called The Blues. As he worked and reworked the picture, Rami was involved in the process, achieving a certain effect rather than trying to imitate real life. Church music and street scenes filled a gallery at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, a major exhibition of the works by Romare Bearden. It was 1971 and the artist was 59 years old, long considered one of America's greatest black artists. His recognition as a great artist without labels came later. From paintings to collages, printmaking to mosaics and watercolors, he experimented with new techniques his whole life. One of his missions, when he became successful, was to encourage younger African American artists. He helped fund the Sink Gallery in New York to showcase their work. He loved giving advice to the students who flocked to his studio. "I think the artist has to be something like a whale, swimming with his mouth wide open, absorbing everything he has until he gets what he really needs. When he finds that, he can start making limitations, and he really begins to grow." A few years later, high above the turquoise sea on the Caribbean island of St. Martin, the birthplace of Nanette, his wife's family, Bearden built a simple white house and studio. There was his striped cat, Jippo, roaming in and out of his studio. Rami started a new series. He'd moved away from using photographs in favor of printed paper. The pictures were based on the energy he felt from the natives who lived on the island. The islanders practiced an old-time religion from West Africa called Obeah. They believed in magic, surrounding themselves, their festivals in a cloak of secrecy. But he got to know the gentle bear of a man with a hearty laugh who quietly observed things with a sense of wonder, and they came to trust him. They invited Rami to witness their ceremonies. Tropical in feeling with bright colors and flowing shapes, these dapple watercolors show fishing villages, sugarcane fields, snakes, birds, lush foliage, and people at work or at rest. By the time Romare Bearden died in 1988, at the age of 76, he'd received many honors, including the National Medal of Arts, and has been showcased in dozens of galleries and museums all over the country. He kept painting up until the day he went to the hospital for the last time. Although Romare Bearden's art found its root in African American culture, it is an art that speaks to everyone, calling and recalling voices from our shared experiences. Rami's people, sitting, standing, strutting, strumming, singing, and shouting, cast their spells and celebrate life. And there is a picture right here of Rami in his studio. And it's showing that, showing a little bit how he works. He's got tapes and glue and scissors, and he's cutting out things. And over here is just one of his pictures called The Piano Lesson. In fact, I have a picture very similar to that to show you. And just a couple more of his pictures. Here's Family Dinner, Carolina Blue, and over here, this is School Bell Time. So that is, and then back here is just some dates and also some references. The author is letting us know what she used to, and quotes what she used. This one's called One Night Stand. It's a band just getting to play the one night. And that is it. Just a few pictures to show you. I don't have as many today because there was so much in the book, but I wanted to show you three of my absolute favorites, and portraits, and also one of his abstracts. So here are three photographs of Rami. Here's one in color, and here's one of him working in a studio. And the last one I really like, it's a picture of him with his cat. I don't know, he just seems, everything I've read about him, he seems like he would be he's such a nice guy that if he met you and you were trying to do something, he would be there to help you and to encourage you. He just, everything I read about him, he just sounds like such a wonderful man. So here are my three favorite pictures of his. First one is called Jazz Village. And in this one you can tell that that this is not painted work. You can tell also because the face is made up of several different pieces. It's not even just like a photograph of a face that he's doing. I like it. Also, take a look at the background, because this will be important, because guess what we're going to be doing is that it's made of just pieces of paper, some of which have been torn to kind of create a new texture rather than everything being cut. All right, the next one is Homage to Mary Lou. I said that there was a piano one. I like this because I'm a trained piano player, so I love anything with a piano. This one is more painted. There's more of the paper has been painted rather than the big photographs, but it still is a collage. And this last one is definitely a scene from the South. I grew up in the Midwest on a farm, and this was something that I would have seen too. It's two women kind of getting dinner ready. One of them is shelling peas, and the other one looks like she's it's called melon season, so it looks like the first of the watermelon is out. And it's just kind of an absolute everyday picture. And I want to show you one of his abstracts. I actually have seen this picture. That's why I chose it. It was on exhibit at a museum at the University of Michigan when I was living in that area. It's called River Mist, and it's pretty, but it's phenomenal in person. It's really pretty cool. And something that not everybody gets is Bearden was honored with a set of stamps based on him and his work. So here is the forever stamps that commemorate the life and the work of Romare Bearden. All right, I moved everything around so we can see what we're going to work on. We are going to be working on making a collage. And what you're going to need for it, you're going to need some glue. You're going to need some scissors. Colored paper. If you don't have colored paper, you can just paint some white paper, or you can find, if there's anything around, you have any old wallpaper, any old fabric, anything at all around. And for pictures, I went through, most of the ones I chose, I went through the newspaper and just found all sorts of pictures of people. And I went through our junk mail. We had some catalogs in here. I found a lot of people in catalogs. And so that sort of thing you can use. I did something, though, that Bearden would not have done, and probably, maybe if he was living now, he would. I decided that, what I wanted to kind of theme our stuff as is, let me look at you for a minute here. I wanted to theme our stuff as, he was so big on the whole idea of communities of people. To think about sometime that you're really happy when you're in with a group. It could be maybe at dinner, maybe at Christmas, maybe your birthday, maybe you have a great time, like if you're playing outside in the pool with your friends, or just sitting out with talking, just anything at all that has to do with, kind of people getting together. And for me, my idea was, I love my family and everything, but I grew up as a musician, and I absolutely love playing with groups of musicians. So I found some pictures of people here that I'm gonna move my camera up just a tad. All right, there we go. I found some pictures of people, and something that he would not have done, but I actually went to the internet and I wanted some instruments, so I found found a piano and a guitar. I did find among my pictures, I was all excited. I did find somebody who was playing the guitar, but I thought that doesn't really go to the spirit of Bearden by by not piecing things together. And I didn't piece the faces together. I've decided I didn't want to do that. But one thing he usually had was stuff in the background, different paper. So that's how I'm going to start. I'm just going to take and glue some paper on top of paper, and to start off with. But think about, where do you feel? Where are you the happiest with a group of people? And one other thing I'm going to do, I'll be right back. I forgot to get some music. I wanted you to listen to some music by him and music that he loved. Okay, I'm back, and I want you to, while you can just watch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this paper, put it in the background. I found I like these two. I was considering to do circles, but I decided I kind of wanted to tear a little bit so I can add just another texture. But while I'm doing that, I'm going to put on some music for you, and it's from a record by the great jazz player Branford Marsalis, but he has a recording that is called, in fact, it's called Romare Bearden Revealed, and it's got some of his favorite music, and so I'm going to start with his Sea Breeze, and I'm going to put it on so we can listen to it while we work. Let me turn her up a bit. Definitely put as many layers as you would like kind of underneath there, but I've decided that's all that I really would like. And so I've decided that this fella is my piano player, and I'm going to cut him a little bit closer. Again, you don't have to be totally piano too. And I have him standing behind the piano. And you don't have to be really careful with the perspective, because there's no way this piano is like would definitely be the wrong size for him. It's way too small. And that's the thing that I really liked in looking at Bearden's works, is that he didn't worry about piecing faces together if the skin colors were exactly the same or anything like that. So I'm not going to worry about that. There we go. So I'm going to have him kind of behind the piano. Maybe he's waiting for everything to start. And
I'm going to start from the back because I would like people to be, I'd like it to be kind of in perspective, so I'm going to do them, oops, rolling away. Here's my bass player right back there. And where's his bass? There it is. He's waiting to play there. And let's see. I found people that look like they could be holding the instruments. All right, I'm going to do one more here for you. This is one of my absolute favorite, players, who is one of his favorites. So, and it's a fellow by the name of Jelly Roll Morton, and this is Jungle Blues by Jelly Roll Morton. Does he look like let's see. Yeah, he looks like he needs a trombone. So let's give him that little trombone. I hear a trombone playing right there, so we'll set that on his lap. All right, let's see. Who else do I have here? Oh, I like this guy. This guy, when I found this picture, I thought, oh boy, he looks like he's playing guitar. So I grabbed him right away. So let's get him trimmed down a little bit. We go. All right, so my little band is coming together. Let's see. Let's get a drummer. I actually don't need to be that careful because it's going to be covered. Okay, so I've got kind of the back row done here. I'm going to shut off Jelly Roll here. So I worked from the backs because I wanted to overlay things, but it depends on what you're doing, how you want to do it. I've got, I have this fella here. Let me put him in. I tried to find bigger people for the close-up and smaller for the other, so I'm going to put him like right there. No? And let's see, we'll give him a violin. This person looked to me like a flute player. That won't make you, I mean, this, just watching me do this, you go and find some pictures for yourself. Think about, think about what you, what kind of thing that you find is, someplace there is flute, there it is. Think about where you find community, where you find like being with people. And if you can't find pictures exactly what you want, you can draw part of it. You could find like hair from something, or you could find, you know, just anything at all. You could paint parts of it. I'm gonna put a flute over her. I seem to put them closer than I had planned. You can actually, probably a smart thing to do, which I decided not to do. I decided to be a little bit improvisatory. Would be to kind of mark out where you want things. And I've got another guitar player. I'm going to put him right there and give him a guitar. Because you don't need to hide the fact that you're working with cut paper, because that's what we're doing. There we go. So I've got a couple more I can add, but here is the beginning of my work of art. I need a couple more players though. Orchestra's not quite full enough. So, well, that is my project for this week, is to make yourself a collage, like Romare Bearden, or Rami as he liked to be called. In fact, I might actually throw my other guitar player down here to fill in right down there. In fact, I think I'm going to be working on this a while longer. I'm enjoying it. So I hope you have fun. Sorry. And something else I might do is I might paint part of it. I might take and add some lines or some music notes. Ooh, I could easily put some music notes in here. That would be good. So I've added myself yet another guitar player down there at the bottom. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. And next week we're going to be going back to pop art, like Andy Warhol. We're going to be looking at Roy Lichtenstein. I have to find out how to pronounce his name, who was known for his art that looked like big blown up comics from comic books or comic strips, and pretty cool stuff. So we'll see you then next week, I hope. Yep, bye-bye.